Okay, guys. Okay, I keep leaving these lights too bright. We're going to try this again. I'm just waiting for the cameraman to link in again. Speeches are about to start, and hopefully Richard will be with us in just a moment. Stay tuned, everyone.
You're there, Judge?
Yeah, mate. I've just sent you a new link.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Speeches have just started. I'll get it back on.
All right, mate. No worries.
Thanks.
See you in a sec. Ta. Bye. Oh, you probably heard that. I've just rung Richard. I am so sorry for the technical issues. Hopefully they have been resolved in Brisbane. I believe the speeches have just started. Richard will be with us in just a second and we'll have some visuals for you. Won't be too much longer. I feel like I need some elevator music for you. Here he is, and camera should be live in just a moment.
Thank you for being here. And for those of you who've been pleased to come on this journey so far. I could drag it on for hours without notes, but you'd be subjected to many variations of the birthday. So I have to read it. A warm welcome to everyone to what I and many of those assembled here consider is an historic event. We have with us our Police Commissioner, Katarina Carroll. We have Australia's preeminent broadcaster, Alan Jones. We have Middle East Humanitarian Day and her 42-year SAS veteran husband, Kevin. Plus, many others, all wanting to give you their views on why our treatment of PTS and mental trauma is not improving and our resulting suicide rate continues unabated. There are other potential interviewees here who have equally interesting views, and they're all listed on the run sheet. I'd also like to welcome our soldiers, our police, our fireys, our paramedics, SES, and especially our military brotherhood, who are all representing the many thousands of brave men and women who contract these illnesses in the service of our country, or by keeping us safe and well here at home. And we shouldn't forget the victims of crime, accidents, and natural disasters like, plus our rural community who are doing it so well. I know that Defence, DVA, QPS, QFES, and QAS are doing a great job, but it reminds me of my old English history book when King Canute sat on the beach and tried to stop the tide coming in. We're not here to rail against the status quo. We're here to tell you how we'd like to improve the status quo. We're not here to put a Band-Aid on a gaping wound. We're here to help to clean out that wound and to make it whole again. Just quickly, I was finally diagnosed with PTSD 40 years after I came home from 12 months in Vietnam with 2 RAF. In that 40 years, I experienced a few highs, but many, many lows in a roller coaster life, which I didn't understand at the time. And then when I was finally diagnosed in 2008 and did a heap of research, it all began to make sense. As a result, I founded Stand Tall for PTS in 2010 to try and make a difference. So I know what I'm talking about. In that 10 years, it has become apparent to me and to many other ex-service organisations, researchers, clinicians, academics and consultants that the rate of success in PTSD management and treatment is not really improving, as I said before. That is drawing a rather long bow, as there are quite a number of people doing great stuff. They're working in isolation and they're having some success. But are they all receiving adequate support? We'll find out in March. It has become apparent to so many of us that money is not necessarily being spent in the right direction. PDS 21 on March 2019 this year is being set up to try to correct. PDS 21 will be a collaboration of 90 to 100 overseas experts, major local influencers, clinicians, researchers, academics, and plain old people who work at the coalface of these illnesses. All of these people have their own ideas of what needs to happen to improvement. We will pool all of this knowledge and experience to come up with a series of serious recommendations, which we would like our governments to take note. For far too long, conferences in this space have been talked about, which have no real outcomes. Stantor has been guilty of this too. PTS 21 is designed to correct it. I've just been invited to a roundtable with the newly appointed Government Suicide Commission. Maybe they're already listening. Today, we're officially launching the fundraising campaign to pay for PTS 21 and other initiatives which we feel need addressing. It's called Bulk for Mental Trauma. I've reached out to a number of award-winning creatives, and Gary, plus our voiceover professional, Terry, plus Taxi Film and Brian Smith, all from my advertising club. And they have come up with a brilliant campaign which encourages all Australians to walk or ride in real time or even virtually to raise money with a line. How far would you go to save a life? This is then backed up with get fit, raise money, save life. What more motivation should all Australians need as a New Year's resolution after 6 months of COVID? This creative and production has been backed up equally brilliantly by Benson and Paul from Rapid Media. They have negotiated to have this campaign to be seen and heard all over the country, on television, radio, newspapers, magazines, outdoor signs, all manner of social media, posters in hospitals, doctor's surgeries, physio outlets and gyms. Plus, we even have beer coasters and COVID. There are examples of all these in your media packs and links to the TV and radio. We also have a super all-encompassing website, www.bulkformentaltrauma.org, built by Nathan in Sydney, which says it all. Our hero shop with Maddie Springer, which you see scattered around this slide, will without doubt be the most seen image all over Australia in the next few months. I have estimated that there could be up to 9 million Australians with either a first-hand, a secondary, or a tertiary emotional attachment to these illnesses through family, workmates, or friends. They are our principal targets for this campaign. They are the people who we think would want to walk, run, or ride to improve or save a life. If we can convince just 10% of that 9 million to participate in some way, then we've succeeded in our goal. I will add here that every cent raised will be accounted for, and we will set up a qualified committee to administer the funds. We are a volunteer organisation, and we want to be totally transparent. Collectively, we have put together more than $1 million plus campaign, and it's all been done pro bono by an incredible group of people who have a passion to try to improve the life or even save the lives of people who need and deserve that. That's over $1 million worth of money, built by people who care. When we were creating this campaign, we were inundated with other offers of help. which included some people with complementary ideas. Firstly, we connected with an extra 600,000 people through the Aussies and Kiwis for Anzac Facebook page, which then led to the Jacqueline. Jay Scott has been a tower of help. He's now organised for this event to be live streamed to more than 70 Facebook groups. And now we're including a creative competition where the theme is recovery. We will give prizes and we'll display the best of drawings, paintings, poems, photographs and short videos which depict this theme. This will allow those that can't or don't want to participate physically to be involved. Creativity is a great healer for these ills, and this alone could help some participants individually while helping others too. Veterans Richard, Kevin and Amber are in charge of this project and are here to talk about it. Then we have OJ Rushman and our Aussie group choir, youth choir. Music is also a great healer. And by including OJ and the many thousands of youthful singers, we are expanding the market we're reaching out to. These young people are the future leaders in our great country, and this campaign will give them an appreciation of what's needed to move forward. OJ is writing a song called Incremental Trauma. This will be recorded virtually in collaboration, possibly with our own Gary Smith, with an international choir and celebrity singers, and included in a video she called Match. You can bet this will go viral with a message of hope for all of Australia and maybe the world. The big plus here is that the Governor-General's wife met the Hurleys there. And coincidentally, the Governor-General and I go back to when he was CDM. Our final cohort is the Military Brotherhood, a national veteran motorcycle club. We have a vision of a massive Australia-wide coordinated motorbike ride, including celebrity bike riders, sometime in February to raise awareness and fun. I've had a meeting with the Military Brotherhood in Perth, who involve other clubs and civilians in their rides. There are 890,000 registered bikes in Australia. What a super spectacle for television that could be if, again, we could just get 10% of the participants. As I said earlier, it's a massive campaign, and when we also factor in a few interviews in the next few months and the stories from today, we'll have well over $1 million worth of publicity, all built on passion and caring. I now need the people of the media to replicate that passion and to convince 9 million people. No bugger it. Please convince 25 million Australians to embrace all of what we're doing over the next couple of months. There are over 1 million deserving people who need help. Early in 2020, Australians were magnificent in their support of the bushfire. And then later, the vast majority of us, with great difficulty, get COVID. And just recently, there was public outrage over official statements as a result of the Barrett report. All three of these will add significantly to the numbers which need our help. We are quite a compassionate nation, so let us as a country do the same sort of thing for mental trauma and PTSD. Most of us have had a very ordinary 2020. So please fill all of your news outlets with messages of hope today. Let's use this initiative as a great positive start for 2021 and even the next 10 years. Thank you.
I was telling the police commissioner this morning my biggest stress was Katarina. Just on that, the lineup of speakers we've got today is super impressive. And again, I want to acknowledge them all individually for taking the time to be here today. Now, time is short, and I don't want to steal any of your thunder by giving you any lengthy introductions, but I do want to let you know how much we appreciate your support with this project, but also us. So, without further ado, I would like to invite Queensland Police Commissioner Katarina Carroll forward to say a few words.
Thank you for practicing that. There's most people do get want to make some acknowledgements before I start. I think firstly, who is the reason why really asked what we're trying to achieve. I'd like to acknowledge Tony Dell himself, Vietnam veteran, former Australian test cricketer and founder of Stanford for the PTS. Mr. Alan Jones is the senior welcome to you. Deputy Commissioner Mark Roach, Emergency Services. Assistant Commissioner Brian Cook, PTS. Andrew Short from Griffith. Dr. Andrew Cooper, consultant psychiatrist specialising in PTSD, Director of Medical Services at Wong Private Hospital and Senior Lecturer at Queensland University. Dr. Jacqueline Drew, organisational psychologist, Senior Lecturer and Researcher at Griffith University. Dr. Kay James, OAM, Humanitarian author and speaker. Dr. Kerry Gaines, former warrant officer and long-serving SAS veteran. Mr. Doug Baird, OAM, Partner of Cameraman, BCMG, representatives of first responder agencies, QPS, QAS, and the ADN. Supporters and friends of Stand Tall for PTS, our military veterans, first responders, and emergency services. Good morning to you all, and Happy New Year. Happy 2021. I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we gather and acknowledge elders past, present and emerging. I would also like to acknowledge members of all cultures who make up our vibrant community and gather here with us today. I am delighted to be part of today's launch for Stand Tall for PTS Goal for Mental Trauma campaign. Stand Tall for PTS, led by Tony and his team, who I've known for quite a few years and extraordinarily passionate about this, have been advocates for improvement in treatment for PTS, the reduction of stigma associated with all mental illness, and the reduction of mental health associated suicide within our ADF, veterans and first responder agencies now for a number of years. I can assure you this is also a passion of mine. As a long career in first responder agencies and policing and fire emergency services, as well as being a member of the Beyond Blue Board, overseeing its groundbreaking national mental health wellbeing study of police and fire emergency services, or emergency services. And that was chaired by former Prime Minister Julia Gillard. I'm only too familiar with the profound impacts that people serving in these roles and what mental health and wellbeing can be impacted by mental health and wellbeing issues. It is a confronting reality that more than 1 in 2.5 first responders have been diagnosed with a mental health condition in their life, compared to 1 in 5 of Australian adults. And that 57% of employees with psychological symptoms didn't recognise it in themselves. In the last year alone, the QPS supported 25 employees who had suicidal thoughts or made suicide attempts, and a further 21 employees who were hospitalised for psychological reasons. The recently completed Beyond the report found the likelihood of poor mental health increased with length of service, and that self-stigma, awareness of negative work compensation experiences, and the perception that asking for help is a sign of weakness were all barriers to finding support seeking amongst affected police and emergency services personnel. We can and must continue to learn about the impact of PTS and other mental health conditions on our members, and more importantly, we must act. As Commissioner of the Queensland Police Service, I have prioritised a commitment to the development of our own recently developed comprehensive wellbeing strategy with the vision of QPS as a thriving workplace where all employees realise their full potential and with a purpose to increase awareness, reduce stigma, and foster a supportive culture, camaraderie, where mental health is an organisational priority. We will continue to work hard together to learn and understand the overwhelming impact that the service of our ADF and first response personnel can have on their lives and the lives of those around them. I commend the work that stands for PTS is doing through the Ball for Mental Health fundraising mission, through its advocacy and through its partnerships with research and medical experts. I look forward very much so to the continuing relationship between QPF and C4 in the future work. Congratulations, a lot more to be done, but we are there for the partnership in the long haul. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Katarina. Next, I'd like to invite Dr. Jacqueline Drew, Senior Lecturer at Griffith University and also QPF.
The focus of what I'll be speaking about today relates to the mental health and well-being of our Australian. Thank you. Perfect, thank you. I've worked for over 20 years as a psychologist and researcher with Australian Police, and now with colleagues in the NYPD and Fraternal Order of Police, who represent over 350,000 officers across the United States. We must recognise that the time has come to move from knowledge to action. But action must be tempered with an understanding of the full range and the complexity of how best to tackle mental health issues. We know for sure, without contradiction, that our Australian police officers are experiencing high levels of psychological stress. The thin blue line is being stretched to breaking point and demands our attention and our action. Recent survey data, as Katarina alluded to, from Beyond Blue, found that 10% of our Australian police officers have very high levels of psychological distress compared to 4% in our general population. 62% of police experience moderate to very high distress, almost double the rate compared to the general population. Compared to ambulance, fire and emergency services, police have the highest level of mental health conditions and the lowest level of positive wellbeing. 11% of all Australian police have probable post-traumatic stress disorder, compared to 8% of the service defence force, and police are estimated to experience PTSD at almost 3 times the rate of the Australian working population. In the previous 12 months, 4.5% of Australian police had thought of suicide, compared to 2.3% in the general population. Of those who have left policing, almost 20% report very high psychological distress, many who have left the service because of being medically discharged or for mental health reasons. This compares to 10% of the serving police population. Almost a quarter of those responding to that study who had left policing reported PTSD, compared to 11% of their serving population. If these statistics are not already alarming, consider this. The individuals we recruit and provide to our police academies, due to the well-functioning and effective psychological screening used, are individuals who have very low levels of psychological stress compared to others in our population. This remains the case, and officers continue to report high levels of mental well-being in the very early stages of their career. But as their careers progress, the cumulative stress and trauma of policing starts to take its toll. Those with little psychological distress coming into policing are now confronted with the traumatic work to which police are exposed, the dangerous nature of their job, and the stigma associated with seeking mental health. This has been exacerbated with what traditionally has been characterised as a summit-up police culture. I spoke earlier about it now being a time to move from knowledge to action. Thankfully, police agencies across the world are beginning to acknowledge that policing has significant negative outcomes for their officers. In 2019, I joined an international consortium coordinated by the NYPD and the US Police Executive Forum to discuss the most promising approaches to combating police suicide. It is no longer in the dark. We have achieved our first aim of increasing knowledge. We have produced the type of data such as that I mentioned and have ensured that issues can no longer be ignored. Some action has begun. Many police agencies now readily agree that post-traumatic stress and even PTSD is a very prevalent outcome of the work that they do. Queensland has become the third state in Australia behind Tasmania and the Northern Territory to introduce presumptive PTSD legislation for first responders. This means that PTSD will automatically be presumed to be work-related unless an employer is able to show that the condition was not actually caused by their job. This is a major shift forward in a world where only a short time ago there was little recognition of the mental health concerns of our first responders. It is a step in the right direction, but we need to be cautious. We are at a crossroad of where action must be tempered with investing in action that works and will reduce mental health harm for the police, other first responders, our defence personnel, and our veterans. There has been a strong emphasis on trauma policing, as there has been in other professions. But research has started to reveal that police are surprisingly resilient to operational trauma police work. However, when faced with trauma that's compounded by organisational factors, poor leadership, unsupportive supervisors, and difficult work conditions, we will see poor outcomes. It is often the organisational context of policing, which, unlike trauma, is both under the control and is constructed by agency leaders, that can cause more harm, or at the very least exacerbate that operational trauma. This is undoubtedly leading to increased rates of post-traumatic stress, depression, and anxiety. This will demand action by those that are in a position to truly make a commitment to changing the organisation environment for these groups. I am, of course, talking about senior leaders within agencies who, under their mandate, have the ability to prevent much of the organisation's preconditions that result in our psychological ill health. They are the gatekeepers, and they will need to make informed, authentic, and determined choices to improve the well-being of our troops. This is where I'd like to provide an example of what leadership needs to look like if we are truly to tackle policing. Our understanding of police suicide has been hampered at its very foundation by the lack of reliable prevalence data. In the US, there's been a recent introduction of the Law Enforcement Suicide Data Collection Act that requires data collection. Australia does not have such a mandate. Our understanding of police suicide rates are piecemeal, and there are significant flaws in current data collection methodologies. Even if suicide data was routinely collected at a national level, no agency routinely collects suicide data of those who have left policing. How can we move to action on police suicide if we don't even know who we have lost, and let alone the journey has ended suicide? These issues were clearly identified as requiring urgent attention in the 2019 Australian 70 inquiry into first responder mental health. The Queensland Police Service has been the first Australian police agency, to our knowledge, that has stepped up to address this call. The study I'm conducting with the QPS involves a retrospective longitudinal study of all Queensland police officer deaths that have occurred across a 10-year period to identify officers who have died by suicide. This is the first time in Australia we will be able to identify all officers who have died by suicide, both currently serving and those who have serving. It will provide the most accurate statistics for a single police agency that has ever been undertaken, and also, given the cooperation of the QPS, which has allowed the linking of their personnel records with coronial data, it represents the most transparent analysis of police suicide in Australia. Undoubtedly, the findings of this research will be impactful and are expected to be available in a couple of months. But for the purposes of the discussion today, this research provides an example of what is possible when senior leaders have an authentic commitment to uncovering what role the organisation is playing in preventing suicide. The level of access to data required of this research demands transparency if it is to be valuable. Commissioner Carroll has championed this research in the face of the unknown, not knowing how many suicide deaths will be found or what role that the organisation may have played in that journey. This takes a courageous leader and one that's committed to improving the well-being of their staff and takes a leap of faith no matter what the outcome. This is sought because the information obtained from the research is needed to improve on what has been done. With the on-the-ground support of Assistant Commissioner Brian Scott, a long-time advocate for police mental health, the authorisation of access to organisational information means that this research will provide insights that have never before been possible without the full cooperation of a police agency. I provide the preceding example for two reasons. One is to promote the collaborative work of the Queensland Police Service, who's leading the way in understanding and addressing police suicide in Australia. Also to show what is possible when senior leaders such as Commissioner Carroll do not just have a stated mental health mandate, but facilitate scrutiny and transparency to ensure that their intentions are turned into action. Commissioner Carroll and Assistant Commissioner Todd are at the forefront of addressing the issue that has been marked as one of national importance. Second is to identify that this is the example of work that we showcase at the upcoming PTS 21 forum that's being coordinated by Stanford PTS. The forum will bring together experts with knowledge who know what action is required and well-informed evidence base of what works. It will inform our agenda for action on the issues of suicide, transition, and models of care. This is desperately needed to take the next step forward and to make real change. It will create momentum and drive support for collaborative work between practitioners, senior leaders, and academics, and it will lobby for a national government approach to best practice. I would like to finish by acknowledging the lives of the police who became part of my research because of the circumstances of their death. This research seeks to value their lives, understand each of their individual journeys, and to facilitate their legacy. We were not able to help these officers in their time of need, but their contribution to improving the lives and the health of their colleagues now and in the future will not be forgotten. Thank you to those officers for their service. Rest in peace now. Your brothers and sisters in blue will take it from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Drew. I think, some of the statistics just highlight how important what we're trying to do is. Next, I'd like to invite one of Australia's most recognised humanitarians, Dr. Kay Danes, OAM.
If I can be so cheeky and just fly the wandering warriors back. Brian's been put in the front there to keep me along. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Tony, and the family too. Thank you, Tony, for organising such an absolutely amazing event and to give us an opportunity to have conversations that really need to be had. And I'm about to deliver one that hasn't been had in public space before, and I feel quite emboldened with my partner in crime, Mr. Alan Jones, who always manages to inspire people to speak up in action and truth and justice. So on that note, I'll deliver it and wait for Brian to cart me off. From the research we know, suicide is the second leading cause of death among serving ADF members and the leading cause of death among veterans. ADF members who are medically discharged are more likely to suicide than those who are discharged voluntarily. Hundreds of redress grievances and complaints are submitted each year by ADF members to the service chief. They represent grievances associated with professional employment failures and are sometimes, but not always, escalated to a defence inquiry. Today, I would like to bring something new to the current narrative in support of our current serving members of the ADF. And thank you for your service. I'd like to make the point that we have put combat-related mental illness at the epicentre of ADF member and veteran suicide for far too long. And in doing so, we have overlooked the impact that failed administrative policy have had on our serving ADF members. Redress and reforms to redress grievances and defence policy processes are urgently needed because in their current format, they are seriously flawed and often result in significant mental trauma and reputational harm to the complainant. Indeed, it is abundantly clear to those serving in the ADF who have experienced either of these processes that they are mechanisms by which the ADF uses the full weight of its resources, human, legal and financial, to minimise liability and reputational harm to itself. The outcomes are almost always in favour of the ADF. As a consequence, the ADF member feels they have been exposed to an injustice, whether real or perceived. And this causes serious distress, and which puts them at increased risk of suicide and self-harm. And it is not difficult to understand why the ADF member may feel there has been an injustice, because the defence inquiry process is not bound by any rules of evidence or legal technicality. Witnesses can give false testimony and do. Therefore, anything they say is protected by legal privilege, which means it cannot be disclosed in civil proceedings, even when defamation has occurred. Inquiry officers are constrained by the fundamental, are not constrained by the fundamental concepts of justice and equality. Most are not legally trained, and many are only ever undertake 4 days of non-mandatory training in conducting an inquiry. These processes are supposed to be timely, but many complaints drag on for years because of the adversarial approach defence usually takes when dealing with complaints. This prolongs the mental trauma to the ADF member. Their anxiety is compounded by the fact that they feel victimised. Those who succeed in arguing their case find their situation unchanged because too much time has taken place too much time has been passed to put in place corrective action. In actual fact, there is no policy in place for corrective action. Of course, ADF members can take their complaint outside the chain of command to the IGADF, the Defence Ombudsman, and even the Human Rights Commissioner. However, these invariably default to the defence decision. And even when it can be substantiated that investigating officers have failed to uphold defence policy and common law, suicidal acts and self-harm usually come from a place of hopelessness and injustice. This is not to suggest that every failed attempt to right an injustice through the chain of command will result in suicide. Still, so many of our ADF members who have complaints before the service chief are pushed to the very edge of their emotional endurance. And let us not forget that they are fighting their perceived injustice within the workplace. Suppose we do not accept that something has to change in order for the ADF members to resolve their grievances through genuine mediation and fix these processes that are currently failing to protect them from feeling like they are being victimised. In that case, it is likely that those ADF members will carry those unresolved grievances into life beyond service. This will impact our efforts to realistically reduce the number of suicides currently plaguing our veterans community. After all, when treating a wound, one must attend to the root cause. One simply cannot apply a dressing and expect the wound to heal. The policy reforms begin with a change to the Defence Inquiry Regulation Act so that the rules of evidence form the basis of all inquiries and provide a fair and transparent process to ensure complainants are able to assert their rights under equal opportunity law, and that the hearing of their complaint adheres to the principle of open justice and common law. Defence inquiries should be legally trained. Witnesses should be required to give evidence under oath or affirmation, and anyone who gives false misleading information should be held accountable. Where any complaint is not resolved during service, then there must be an appeal mechanism fully free from defence influence to assess the fairness of the decision. Finally, and most importantly, the implementation in the ADF of a corrective action policy. Now is the time to stand tall for the thousands of men and women who have worn their uniform in service to our nation, and particularly for those of you who still wear it. Together, we must be bold in our endeavours to encourage much needed policy reforms, so at the very least, our serving members may have realistic opportunities to resolve their complaints in the workplace, secure corrective action to reduce exposure to suicide risk and self-harm, and to restore their dignity and to protect their professional reputation. This is not an overwhelming task. It does not require an influx of financial resources. It merely requires the will to recognise that policy reforms are needed, and courage for those in positions of power to take a step forward. Thank you very much. Not black out there this morning. Thank you for your service.
Thank you, Dr. Daines. Our next speaker needs a little introduction. Alan Jones has been a mate of Tony's for a long time, a staunch supporter of all that Tony's endeavoured to do to stand for over the years. So I'd like to invite him up to the microphone and follow on from Dr. Daines.
Thank you very much. And as with the other speakers, it's a privilege to be invited to be here on what is a very important cause. The Commissioner, of course, and Jacqueline have both spoken from the perspective of the police. Kay has spoken from the perspective of those people who serve in combat, or in fact, may I say, are directed by government to serve in combat. But of course, as we all know, that kind of chain of command also applies when things go wrong. So just as the person at the top gives the instructions when it all starts, when something goes wrong at the end, the person at the top passes the blame down the line again. So I'm delighted that these young men are with us, men who are serving. I will be returning in a moment to very issues that you confront. But may I just firstly embarrass the man who really is the architect of all of this, because the trouble with Tony Dell is that he speaks, we've heard him today, but people, although I must say, Katarina, you did allude to this, people don't really know who this fellow is. This man, he's a metaphor of the issues that we are addressing today. I knew him when he was a schoolboy, a fearsome left-arm opening bowler. Magnificent. He was spotted by Sir Donald Bradford after returning from Vietnam, after facing angry men on the other side, determined to kill. That's what war is about. It's something apparently that our political and defence leaders don't understand, none of whom have ever faced an angry face in combat or had a shot fired at them. This man was spot in the middle of the Tet Offensive, and indeed was lucky enough to wake up the next morning to find the most extraordinary and horrific pictures of men whose lives have been destroyed by the Vietnam and whose faces and heads, brains, internal organs were exposed. That's what Tony Dell was exposed to. He returned, and I say he's a metaphor, he returned to Australia and said not a single thing about his term in combat. In fact, he was then picked for the final test. It's almost 49 years ago, in February, will be 49 years since he was picked for the final, the sixth test against Ray Illingworth's England side, the Ashes. It was Ian Chappell's first test as captain, the sixth test. Dennis Lilly had made his debut in the previous test and taken 5 wickets. Ian Chappell was the new captain. He threw the red ball to Dennis Lilly at one end and to this man at the other. Why am I telling you this? Because he actually shared a room with the captain. The captain, I might say, Ian Chappell thought, well, I thought I got a room to myself. But he didn't. He got a room with Tony. At no time, at any time, did he even know this man had served. And it wasn't until 40 years later that he was comfortable about actually saying what he'd done, where he'd been, and what he'd seen. So we're witnessing here a man who is indelibly in history because now at the passing of the great Arthur Morris, this is the only man in this country of 25 million people, and there will be no other, who has worn the baggy green cap, the green and gold, and has worn the uniform in combat. Now, I'm staggered, really, that when we meet here today, there is not a member, I presume, of the Queensland government. It's to your great credit, Commissioner, that you're here. There's no one here from the federal government, and nor is there likely to be, because these are the people who voice blame on innocent individuals. But Catherine McGregor, you may have seen on my program from time to time, a magnificent scholar, one of the most extraordinary writers, cricket writers, but a knowledgeable lady from the point of view of Kane. You made a very valid point. Kane made this point for a moment, that anyone can say anything about what's happening. None of this is tested. The rules of evidence don't apply. They're not challenged, these witnesses, and there is no redress. And I'll come to a moment to this infamous Brereton report, and I'll come to that in a moment. And when I resume in February 1 on Sky News, I'll come to it in more detail, and it won't make pleasant viewing for the government of Australia, I can tell you. So we don't think Christmas has come along, but I just go back to Catherine, in a piece that she wrote recently for the Australia, which is a beautiful piece about you and where you come from, but she ended by saying, I brought this with me today, she says, talking about Tony and what happened, because they had Tony Abbott, when he was Prime Minister in 2014, honoured Tony at Marmica Oval, which was, I think, the last time you played there, and they all went out to celebrate. But Catherine McGregor made a very valid point, because not only, people say, oh, when we serve, we're talking about post-traumatic stress. And I know that Tony often, when he's talking about it, leaves the word disorder on, because it intimidates people from coming forward. You're a dysfunctional person, you're a non-person, you're a person of disorder or disability. So we're talking about post-traumatic stress. But the consequences of these are, and Tony experienced these and so many others, suddenly you don't know why, but you're aggressive in the workplace, they get rid of you, you're given opportunities to work and the same with the police force, and suddenly you behave in a strange way. So this leads to marriage breakdowns, it leads to a loss of stability, a loss of personal recognition and self-worth. So here we was at Marmica Oval with the Prime Minister, Catherine McGregor wrote this. Marmica Oval in summer is picturesque. Catherine, I know you're here in spirit. She wants to be here, but she's in Canberra. The blazing lights compete with the fading twilight to illuminate the little ground upon which Bradley himself played his very last match. After dinner, on a balmy evening in November 2014, Tony Abbott is greeting a line of well-wishers and local identities who want a moment of his time. A low hum runs through the crowd. The head table is empty, but for a hulking, solitary figure, Tony Dell sits alone. He loathes crowds. He doesn't engage in small talk. That evening, his service and his battles with PTS have been recognised by the game he loves and by the nation's leader. But war, Catherine writes, is not a game. Tony Dell, she says, ruminates quietly, oblivious to the raucous cacophony around him. His gaze seems to be on the pitch, yet his focus seems to be elsewhere. Perhaps the images and sounds of the present will always vie with those of shadowy figures in black, moving stealthily through the jungle as his heart races, as it did that night so long ago in Vietnam. She finishes. Whatever records fall this summer, Tony Dell unquestionably occupies the last post. He holds a slot in an immortal team from which he will never be dislodged. This man, as I said, the only living Australian amongst 25 million who's worn the baggy green and gold, but actually served in combat. Which brings me to this very unfortunate episode, and it's pivotal at this time, and that is the Brereton report, about which I want to say something, some of which I haven't said before. There's a golden rule, Katarina, as in leadership. When you're sick of saying it, they're only starting to hear it. So they'll get sick of me saying it, and then eventually someone will hear it. But my attention has just been drawn to a group of Vietnam veterans who addressed what they believed in writing, what they believed was the current military crisis in Afghanistan. And they have forwarded a written article. I'll just share with you some of the points they make before I come to a little bit of detail. And it says in part, these are former, I signed their name, but you won't read about this anywhere. But they say in part, it may be the case that no officer has been identified. Remember, Morrison, the Prime Minister of Australia, told the world, I've worked for a Prime Minister, I was a speechwriter for a Prime Minister. I know that you have to be fastidious about your language because the once it's uttered goes all around the world. So the world were told that this report was full of brutal truths. Brutal truths. Now it's set.
Well, we seem to have frozen everybody right in the middle of Alan Jones's broadcast there. I don't know what's happened, but I'm assuming it was a mobile network issue. Whoop, just dimming my lights for you. Yeah, it would appear to be a complete loss of connection with our cameraman, which is unfortunate. Right in the middle of Alan Jones making comment about the Brereton report and government. Would have been interesting to hear. I am going to hang out and hope that Richard manages to dial back in, or dial back in, that's so old-fashioned. Hopefully he'll manage to reconnect with us. Excuse my eye. It's not a black eye. I've just been bitten by something. Nobody hit me, I promise. Unless they did it while I was asleep, or maybe New Year's. I did have a couple of whiskies too many. No, unfortunately, it looks as though we may be at a stop. I'm going to jump off the video for a second. I'll keep the stream running and I'll see if I can get hold of our cameraman. Bear with me.
skilled that the incidence of death will be minimised. So they went back and forth. Some of them said every 6 months. Some went for 14 deployments. And the other lot didn't have a sign on their breast saying, I'm your friend and I'm your enemy. We do friendship. You want to see some of the scenes that these people had encountered. So hence this letter. It says the suicide rate, official reports inform that in the period 2001-2016, over 56 Australian service personnel were killed in action, and 373 of the veterans who served in that period committed suicide. Does this not shame government? Does this require Tony Dell to launch a campaign here today? What is wrong with these people? They think Christmas time. Release the Brereton report, come to that again in a minute. Release the Brereton report for Christmas, forget about it. Like hell we will. Like hell we will. Some people are going to be made advanced. The suicide rate was 7 times more than battle casualties. This is not Alan Jones. These are people who serve and have done some homework. They signed their names. Corrigan, Wood, Seeley, Franklin, O'Neill, Savage, Rifleman, Section Commander, Platoon Sergeant, Commander. They say the suicide rate was 7 times more than battle casualties. What more warning, they say, was required for the government and the military hierarchy to thoroughly investigate the causes of suicide? Not Tony Dell. If the government is going to send people into fields of combat, do they wipe their hands of the consequences? Yes, the answer to that is yes. We blame someone else. And we issue a report. We apologise to the world. It says, to our national shame, the suicide rate has increased and it's more likely to be 10 times the battle fatalities, with another 9 suicides in the last few weeks. Well, the Brereton report, of course, accelerates the incidence of suicide. They're all guilty. If the same proportions apply to all wars we've been involved in, we would experience over 1 million suicides. They say unimaginable. It is a simple reality, etc. They say it's simple reality. The soldiers dehumanise their immediate enemy combatants. Anyone of sound mind could not callously take the life of another non-combatant human being. If innocents have been massacred in every war in history, stroke, in every war in history, there have been quote-unquote war crimes. Put your hand up if you can tell me how many people since World War II have been prosecuted for war crimes. How many? 0. What are we starting about now? Where did this come from? What was the agenda? What's it about? And who's gone in to battle to defend these men who put their lives, like our policemen and women, on the line every day? And these are men who no one's taken any notice of it. It's only when the perpetrator dehumanises an entire country or a section of a country in this way that has happened throughout history. Yes, people die in war. That's the purpose of going. Instead, I might add, by government. The focus for Australia, at least from 2016, should have been on the origins of mental health issues, starting with the initial recruitment, basic and core training, leadership tolerance assessment, and overexposure to battle. And then it goes on. Which brings me to the Brereton report. I've said before, and I'll say it again, I find this one of the most disgraceful chapters in Australian political history. And it's not over, and the end of it hasn't been written. I've made my point, and I think that Tony made the point, and I think Katarina as well, that 9 million Australians outside the police service from post-traumatic stress, frightened to admit to it. And the consequences of it are there, but no one wants to know about it. But all sides, it is a historical fact that all sides in combat commit whatever war crimes. I mean, I made the point, how many have been charged as World War II? None. And Jackie Lambie made the point in pardon my language. I don't normally swear. No. But in a written article yesterday, Jackie Lambie made the point that all these people are sent to war by government. They direct, we'll go to Afghanistan, we'll go to Iraq, where we are. They don't put their lives on the line. Campbell's never sent an angry shot. He's the boss, defence force. The other fellas, they're Burr, appropriate name, head of the army. Burr, is he ever? I mean, these people have never, ever seen an angry shot. But of course, as Jackie Lambie, this were her words yesterday, but when the shit hits the fan, she says, they're nowhere to be seen. They want to blame someone else. And so, Angus Campbell says he's going to restrict, or he goes, until Morrison got terrified, the meritorious unit citation. Strip. Now, I'll come to that in a minute as well. I just want to make a couple of points here. And that's what she says. Jackie Lambie, the shit hits the fan, she said, where are they? Gone missing, go down the line, down the ladder, blame the people in combat. You see, we're talking about SAS Special. For 50 years, we've been sending them on the most difficult tasks, such that we don't know who they are, where they've been, where they're trained, what they do. Never done. And yet, half of our battle deaths of the last 50 years have been for these men. Half of them. These men who are said to are now vilified for long ones in this Brereton report. And yet, a service which was regarded until the Prime Minister opened his mouth for brutal truths, a service regarded around the world as the best, the envy of the world. So when this happens, of course, it's not just these men over here. Their families, their wives, their friends, their kids go to school, can't go to the corner shop. Oh, you're one of those people. Read those headlines. No, is your husband in this? How do you answer? So more trauma, more stress, more people wondering whether their life is worth living. And yet, you and I didn't go to Afghanistan. Morrison didn't go. Reynolds didn't go. Campbell, he was somewhere. Didn't fire a shot, didn't go anywhere near the action. And here we now are, blaming all of these people. Why? Well, let me tell you something about the meritorious citation. There is a thing in government and in law called letters patent. Patent comes from the Latin word patio, which means open. And letters patent are issued by a monarch or the monarch's equivalent. So there would be a letters patent in relation to the government, a letters patent in relation. And so they issued in 1991 Queen Elizabeth II, the monarch, and the titular head of Australia while we remain a constitutional monarchy, whether you're in that or not is irrelevant. She currently is the titular head, countersigned by Bob Hawke in 1991. And the letters patent brought into being, which is basically, it means the document doesn't have to be ripped open. It's an open document instead. And it brought into being in 1991 the meritorious citation. And it provided for those people in service, in particular places like Afghanistan, to receive the unit to receive a citation for, as is obviously said, meritorious. That was 1991, countersigned by R.J. Hall, Prime Minister of Australia. And none of this is why you watch February 1, I'm telling you, none of this, where this is coming from. This is going to be tough. 1991. The Brereton report came out on the 19th of November, and we were told about brutal truths. And the world will be shocked. What did Reynolds say? It made me sick. I doubt she's read it. It made me sick. She had sort of taken the life of everybody else. And we apologise to Afghanistan and we're going to compensate families. Except that there are a few of us around who actually do homework. If you go back to the 13th of July, okay, the 13th of July, 2020, on November, July, August, September, October, November. the 13th of July, the Prime Minister of Australia altered the letters patent. 13th of July. Now you'll recall that nowhere, when they initially said they were going to strip all these people of the meritorious citation, obviously when the letters patent were issued way back in 1991, there has to be provision for those people who transgress. There was no provision for what Campbell said. No provision to remove the citation from an individual who had won it. No, sir. And indeed, Mr. Baird is wearing his son's citation here today. He's got it with him on that blazer. There's Cameron. Those are his medals. And the only provision in the letters patent is that they could revoke your right to wear it. They had no power under the 1991 letters patent to revoke the citation. No power at all. So, way back, months before Brereton, I hope you're still with me here, months before Brereton's release, this is premeditated. The government of Australia has known something it hasn't told us. Way back in July, it is preparing punitive action. It alters the letters patent. A new letters patent authorised by Griffith II, signed by Morrison, is then issued. And under that, July 13, under that, a whole unit, the Defence Minister, the Prime Minister, the Foreign Minister, the Chief of Defence have the power to remove the citation, the whole kit and caboodle, from the whole unit, innocent or guilty, before anything's been proven. Hence the statement made immediately the report was released that this action would be taken against London, something that the outcry from me and others we went down, Mr. Bowman and Morrison saying, oh, that won't happen. Well, Mr. Morrison, you're going to have to answer why did you alter the letters patent in July when the report wasn't going to be released until November? It's not the only question that he'll have to answer. He won't answer. They think Christmas is come and gone. So the union over there, let me say to you, these are grievous maltreatments of our men like you who put your life on the line. I want you to know one thing. Wherever I walk in the street and people have verbalised, they said, don't touch it. Don't touch it. Out there, the general public is 99.9% on your side. So head high, head up. I know you can't open your mouths, you can't fight the battle, but there are those of us who are prepared to fight it. What has happened here, and it's the reason we're here. This is why people face stress. This is why there are suicide rates. And this is why once that report was released, you heard what these men said. Not me, I had 9 deaths in a week, 9 more suicides. Can't happen. This is what what on earth is Tony Dell having to do this for? Isn't this as plain as the nose on your face that we have a crisis? I'll tell you something. There are royal commissions everywhere. There won't be a royal commission to the Defence Force Administration. Nowhere in the world. Indeed, have a look around the country, and whenever there is a vice-regal job up for grabs, that is the Governor of this or the Governor-General, who gets it? Someone from Defence. And Brereton was himself a mate of these people that he said are exonerated. They were too far away from the action. Does that mean the contents of this report are in some way contaminated? When the bloke compiling the report is friends with these other people who are in charge of those officers who are now being condemned. And so too the Governor-General. We'll write to the Governor-General, say, well, the Governor-General's a mate here. He was David Early. This is extraordinary stuff. And they won't call a royal commission because they're the biggest cover-up merchants in the country. And they're massive buck passes. Well, I'm saying to all Australians, don't let it happen. The nation has got to get behind these people. This visit that Tony is talking about needs massive national, universal commitment and support. We are facing an epidemic here. It's coronavirus stuff. No one, 99% of coronavirus cases are mild, by the way. 99% of coronavirus. Has any politician ever knows it? No, because they want us to live in fear and anxiety. But I'm telling you, this is real what we're talking about. What Tony Dell is talking about. Fancy being picked for Australia, rooming with your captain, And you've never, ever mentioned to him that you served in Vietnam. And that story can be told over and over and over again, because it was the most controversial of wars, and there were protests in the street. The gin cans led them to the streets of Melbourne. And when these men came back, they felt ashamed. They were made to feel ashamed. Don't show your head, don't show your face. And the psychological and emotional consequences are such that people are living with that damage. And Tony now, thanks to Stallions and good friends around him, has come to be seen what has happened to him, and he doesn't want it happening to others. So today is a really critical day. I congratulate you, Tony. Magnificent stuff. I make you captain of a different Australia. And it's the Australia that seeks reform for the injustices that have been done and to significantly address the critical crisis of post-traumatic stress. Thank you for being with us.
Good luck, Mr. Morrison. Last but not least, I'd like to invite Dr. Andrew Koo to say a few words. Dr. Koo is the Director of Medical Services at Private Hospital, and he's been in the trenches with Tony and Stantor for a very long time, and he probably has 3 terabytes of Tony's influence. Dr. Andrew Koo.
Thank you very much. First of all, everybody that came, showing support, applause. Tony approached me recently to just do a wrap up of what happened today at this launch, and just got back from holidays today. I speak to him on the phone, and little did I know I'd be talking after such a a distinguished group of speakers, and trying to wrap up after Australia's great parade. So look, forgive me, I'm not going to try and match up, but really just try and bring it all together at the end. And I won't keep you all too long. So my name's Andrew Koo. I'm a psychiatrist. I work as medical director at Geelong Private Hospital, which is a hospital known for its treatment of post-traumatic stress disorder, and particularly associated with the military and the emergency services. I've been doing that for a long time now. I think at latest count, I've been directly involved in the clinical treatment of over 2,000 people for about the last 20 plus years in recovery from post-traumatic stress disorder. I've been lucky enough in the later stages of my career to be involved in more research in this area, and also to be involved in some important boards with regard to mental health policy making across a number of different spheres. So PTSD is a chronic, complex, and often treatment-resistant disorder. It doesn't go away quickly. Once it happens, it's very hard to convince a patient not to be impatient with regards to their recovery. I mean, that's a general rule of anything medical, but with PTSD, it's generally, and anyone that's got it will tell you this, it's not weeks, it's not months, it's recovery really measured in years. It really suffers with respect to other psychiatric diseases and certainly and conditions, as well as other medical conditions, in that we're really sort of quite behind with respect to the effectiveness of our treatments, and particularly our drug treatments. This has to do a lot, I think, with the fact that PTSD wasn't generally accepted as a condition, as a psychiatric or medical condition until 1980. I'm sure we'll have to think about that. It's really not that long ago. And when we all know, historians, authors, playwrights, from antiquity, all knew this condition existed, as long back as we have records to show that what people were thinking about. So as long as people have been writing, certainly if you go back and look at Hittite tablets or ancient Sumerian tablets, or if you look at ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics, they all like to talk about the things that were important at that time, for wars and natural disasters. You can read on from that. You can see reference to people not being the same afterwards, isolating, using the drugs that were used in that part of the world at that time excessively, being angry, not sleeping. This is all the same thing. It's probably if you look at records, one of the oldest medical conditions we have evidence to show. So 1980, it first appeared in psychiatric diagnostic tone, the DSM-3, and that was after a very powerful lobby group of American Vietnam veterans. We think we have a powerful lobby group of Vietnam veterans. Here we said 50 to 60,000. In America, there were over 1 million people sent to Vietnam. And that powerful lobby group lobbied the US government. At that time, the American Medical Association, Association, fortunately, PTSD was accepted and appeared first in 1980 medical diagnostic test. Since then, we've been catching up, but we've still got catching up to do. So I found myself in the early part of my career treating Vietnam veterans that had had the condition for 30 plus years, and I would only were just putting up their hand, come and see me. This is in the early 2000s, long, and I absolutely fondly remember treating them and going through their journey with them and seeing a lot of them improve. But I remember at that time really critically wondering, I wonder what it'd be like to look at these people as they got the disease, or even more fantastically, even prior to the medical condition. Well, let's call it disorder and a disease. And imagine if I got to see them before. Could we make a difference? And the great thing is that now we've reached that juncture where we start to make some of those hypotheses, see if we can change the course of someone's mental health trajectory by doing something prior to getting better. We're even further down the track of knowing now that early intervention definitely makes a difference in the clinical course of post-traumatic stress. So at that time, I began starting to try and make people aware of how important it was to do this. But of course, no one had listened to really effectively a medical nerd who still really looked like we just left school only about 5 years before. So then this point brings me to 2014, around about then, when I think Tony and I first came across each other by hearing each other in the media. And I remember thinking at that time, oh, this is great. Here's another really well-meaning individual who wants to make a difference in this area of mental illness. But unfortunately, I'd seen many people like Tony come and go, try and make a difference and just get burnt out with not really finding any purchase. But interestingly, this was a guy who brought a very
Oh, we seem to have lost the stream again. Oh, goodness me. We are having issues, aren't we? Guys, look, I'm going to call it a close there, I think. After Dr. Andrew Koo, we basically have the band playing again, and we had a lot of audio issues with that earlier. And while the band's playing, there's standard media interviews going on. What we are going to do is try and source as many of the other recordings as we can get our hands on. So, 7, 9, 10, ABC, anyone who happens to be there, and we will share those to the group. As you can see along the bottom of the screen, we've had a ticker, as they call it, running along the bottom of the screen there. You can go to www.bolt4mentaltrauma.org to donate or to register your own individual or team walk, cycle, or run. Thanks, everybody, for your patience today. I really appreciate it. We've had quite a few technical issues. God bless. Lest we forget, Happy New Year, and catch you later.